She is the chief investigative correspondent for Inside Edition. She has also been a sportscaster and a cheerleader. And y'all, she made Dennis Rodman cry. And she tells us all about it in her book. I'm Sheba Turk, and this is Stay Lit. Lisa Guerrero is joining us to tell us about her book. It's called Warrior, My Path to Being Brave. I loved every second of this book. Thank you so much for joining me for my new show.
First of all, congratulations on your new show. Thank you for having me. And I wrote Warrior for you.
I felt that.
For women like you. Because I didn't have a book to kind of guide me along when I started as a sportscaster here at CBS 2, the same station that you work for. But this was going back to the 90s. And I remember being in locker rooms, being by myself, trying to kick and claw and scratch my way in front of, everybody from Shaq and Kobe to, Kevin Brown and, Sean Green and all of the stars at the time. And I just remember looking around and seeing these male faces and saying to myself, I don't have anybody to talk to. I know I'm living a part of history, and I feel like I should be sharing this with somebody. So I started journaling. And my journals and my notes from being a sportscaster at that time became the basis of Warrior. But I had no idea at the time that my career was going to go way over here and then way back here and then up and down and all the things that had happened. So I'm glad I started journaling. Boys and girls, make sure you journal.
Thank you for that reminder.
So important.
Yeah, this really felt like a guidebook for young women in many ways. What I love about your path is that it's not traditional at all, and you reinvented yourself successfully so many times. So I was thinking, where do we even start this to get to the end, which is Inside Edition or present day? Where do we even start with your journey?
What I want to do is start with the name of the book in the beginning. So it's called Warrior, My Path to Being Brave, because my last name, Guerrero, means warrior in Spanish. And when I was 8 years old, my mother was diagnosed with lymphoma. She was 29. And before she passed away, she pulled me aside and she said, Lisita, never forget your last name is Guerrero. Guerrero means warrior, and you were born to fight. And then she passed away shortly after that. And I didn't know what to do with that message. It seemed like she wanted me to know something, but at 8 years old, I didn't understand the mission.
Right.
What my heritage was, the meaning of my last name. And it took me decades to realize that I am a warrior, that I am a fighter. She was telling me, you have to go and be a fighter for others, for yourself, for other women, for people that come after you. Be that fighter. And so that's what the book is about. It's those lessons. And, that's where it starts.
I love that.
And it sounds sad, and that part of it is sad.
Yeah, there are sad moments. I'm sorry that you lost your mom at such a young age. She was young and you were young, but that leaves you with your wonderful father. And it explains a lot of how you explain in the book that your definition of a woman really came from a male viewpoint because you didn't have a mom to talk to. You didn't have a ton of women around.
Yeah, and it's funny because in my book, I wrote the dedication. It's dedicated to my dad.
Oh,
I wrote something for you in there.
Oh, thank you.
But the dedication says, the other kids felt sorry for me because I didn't have a mother, but I felt sorry for them because they didn't have my father, to Walter Coles. So the book is about, in many ways, her, the name.
Of course.
But it's also about my relationship with my dad.
Yeah, a beautiful tribute.
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, that's where it starts. And then because he taught me the language of sports, because he was a sports fan himself, I thought early on I'm going to be a professional football player.
I love that. I love that the book you were like, as a little girl, you're like, I'm going to be the quarterback.
Yeah, I was very specific. The Chargers quarterback. Yeah. We lived in San Diego at the time. And my dad didn't say no. My dad took me in the backyard and showed me how to throw a perfect spiral.
Wow.
And so all of those years of, learning these things from my dad helped prepare me for the time when I became a sportscaster. But the reason I wanted to be a sportscaster was I was a Rams cheerleader.
Right.
Because as a little girl, I finally realized, okay, I guess I'm not going to be the quarterback, but I want to be around the sport.
Yeah.
So I tried out for the Rams, and there were 1,100 girls at the time trying out that year, 1984. And 7 of us made it. And I was one of those rookies. And those relationships with those other women are still my best friends today.
Wow, I love that.
40 years later.
Wow.
But those lessons I learned also as a cheerleader helped helped me, the foundation of performing and getting the confidence and being out in the community representing a huge brand like that is helpful. But ultimately, I remember standing on the sidelines and looking over and seeing these men that were the sports reporters. And I remember saying to the cheerleader next to me, one day I'm going to do that. And she laughed. She's like, girls aren't sports reporters.
Yeah, what are you saying?
And a few years later, I was working at CBS 2 as a sports reporter.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. There are many times in the book you call your next move. And I wonder if you felt you had the power to do that, or speaking it out loud you thought had power. How were you able to literally call your next move and it happened?
I think there is something to be said for visualization, which athletes use constantly. You visualize the goal, and then over time, it becomes natural and it gets ingrained in your body that you're going to do that motion to get you to that goal. So I use visualization constantly. I have always been somebody that has had a wild imagination and a ton of ambition. And I think I'm sitting across from somebody who's also similar to that.
So yes.
And I think that that's such a useful thing because it helps get you out of the box of how other people define you. You decide, I regret to inform you that the labels you put on me are not the labels I put on myself. So that frees you up to fly. That frees you to be able to determine what you want to do. And so I've always kind of been lucky because I didn't have anybody telling me you can't do that, and me agreeing with them. I've always felt like I can achieve that.
Yeah.
And I think you just have to tell yourself you can do it. As corny as it sounds, it's true. When you see a goal in front of you and you visualize doing that, it's a lot easier to do that. You've got to visualize it first. It's really important to visualize where you want to go.
That is
some
important.
People call it manifestation.
Yeah.
Kind of new agey, language for the same thing.
For the very
That's
same
a practical thing.
Yeah.
Visualization first.
That we watch you do so well and with such big moves. We're not talking about small things here. I'm talking Monday Night Football, the cover of Playboy, CBS. I mean, everything you've done is top notch. And you were like, you know what? I saw that. I think I want to try it. Okay, so walk me through the next steps. We go from cheerleader to sportscaster. Yeah. You were also acting at the same time?
Yeah. So my dad, after my mom died, put me in theater therapy to deal with grief. So immediately at 8 years old, I was like, oh, I love this. I love being able to channel emotion in a positive way. So I became an actress really young. When I was a teenager, I got an agent, started driving up to Los Angeles and auditioning, and I started booking things right away. I did over 200 commercials and, little parts in shows like Matlock, In the Heat of the Night,
Amazing.
Frasier,
all the good throwbacks.
And I started getting roles in movies, Batman Returns. And so I just started saying, I want to be an actress, but I also love sports and I want to be a sportscaster. And I remember I had a manager that said, you can't do both. You have to pick. It's either one or the other. So I did 2 different headshots and 2 different resumes.
Wow.
One for acting and one for sportscasting. And I got in touch with an acting agent, got signed by them, was signed by a broadcast agent, and they didn't know that I was auditioning.
That's amazing.
And finally, in one day, I got both the CBS 2 contract offer as a sportscaster, and I got booked on Aaron Spelling's Sunset Beach as a lead.
Wow.
And so Monday through Friday on NBC, I was doing sports. I was over at Burbank Studios, where we shot Sunset Beach. And on the weekends, I was at CBS 2 doing sports, and 2 nights a week also, like Tuesday and Thursday nights, CBS, and the weekends.
That's amazing.
It's just crazy. I can't believe I did it. The audacity, honestly, the audacity of youth. But I said, I want to do both.
Yeah, it's that audacity, though, that seemed to empower you, which I love. Then we get to you choosing to do the Playboy cover. You battle over that with the book. You decide to do it as an empowering moment. And I love that in that interview, you tell them, you know what? I'd like to try Inside Edition next. And here we are.
Yeah, they heard. And so, and I, it's really funny. The executive producer jokes. He's like, I remember seeing you being covered in like the New York Post, having done this shocking thing, the cover of Playboy after Monday Night Football. And I couldn't believe that you did that. And I just said, well, let's do a story on her. And when they did the story, because we have so many female viewers, they weren't sure how I was going to go over. And the viewers loved it because I was 40 at the time.
Yes.
And on the cover of Playboy, and as a Latina, very unusual. You know, typically, especially back then, everybody was blonde and young. And so I was out of the box. And the viewers liked me.
Yeah.
And so there you go. And I've been there for 18 years.
That's amazing. Lisa, everything you've done has been out of the box. She made Dennis Rodman cry, but y'all know I'm saving that story to the end. See, I work on TV. I know how to tease. Okay, but you could have made this book about so many things. You chose bravery, and that definition of bravery seems to evolve for you throughout this book. So I want to talk about that next. Okay, so bravery is what the book is about. It has so many different definitions for you, which is what I really loved. Because often you meet a person and like, oh, being brave is fill in the blank, right? Doing this daring thing when you're scared. Yeah. For you, it has so many definitions. And I want to start with the Playboy cover since we were just talking about it. That moment in the book, you tell us bravery was tuning everybody out. You were getting such horrible criticism, right, in the sports world. And you were like, you know what? I need to drown these people out and be brave.
I think, you know, whether it's Playboy for me or making decisions that are outside of your comfort zone, being brave is not about not being scared. Being brave is about being scared and doing something you want to do anyway. And so, you know, I started noticing that I had a tendency to be brave when I was younger, but it was typically in response to somebody else being cruel. Or somebody being hurt. It started with my little brother.
And the lunchbox.
And his lunchbox getting stolen. So I had to go after the school bully, get my brother's lunchbox back, and I punched the kid.
Yes.
And I got in trouble. I was proud of myself too. And I did get in trouble. And my dad's like, okay, violence never solved anything. And I'm like, Okay, well, in this case,
it sure did.
He's not bothering me or my brother anymore.
Exactly.
So I started realizing that I have a tendency to stick up for other people. And I realized that the bravery aspect of anybody's journey, really true bravery, is not audacity. It's not swagger. Real bravery comes from empathy. Realizing that somebody else needs your help. So either you're standing up for somebody else or you're standing up for yourself. And that's hard to say. Sometimes I want to do what's right for me, period. I need to stand up for me. And as women, sometimes I think we get intimidated. We don't ask for the raises that we deserve. We don't ask for the things that we need. We're so willing to smile and play nice. And in my book, I talk about, we're always told, don't burn a bridge. Honey, I think sometimes you got to light that match, burn the whole village down.
I literally wrote this on my page because I'm a person who does this. If I don't like how someone operates personally, I'm like, I don't care what business advance or thing I can get out of them. I don't deal with your character. And when I read that in your book, it was like finally someone who says, you know what? If they're not your type of people, let it go.
For every bridge you burn, there will be a path in front of you to take that path. Don't look back. If there's something wrong, if there was a red flag there was a red flag you were supposed to notice. And we can stay in a rut, whether it's a bad relationship, a bad job, whatever it is. We can stay there and smile. But we're not growing, and that's not the brave thing to do.
Yeah, and you teach us that in the book through the lawsuit you went through with the crafts, which I think a lot of the stories in your book are interesting because now in present day, though, people have gotten in trouble for other things.
Yeah,
that makes sense in the context of the stories you dealt with them. But basically, you end up getting fired.
Yes,
unjustly.
Yes,
suing and winning, which is so impressive. But it came from like some really terrible stories. Robert Kraft's son told you to remove all the black music from your playlist when you were leading the cheer team.
Yeah, so that was so shocking to me. I was a Rams cheerleader for 4 years. Then I became the cheerleader director and choreographer in Atlanta for the Falcons for several years. Had great experiences with both those teams and all those owners. Then I come to New England, and they have 3 different owners in 3 different years because they kept selling the team because the team was terrible. And so I kept getting hired by each, but I had to, go through the interview process each time. So finally I'm with the Crafts, who own the team currently. That was their first year. And the son, Jonathan, was made my boss. And He was really inappropriate in so many ways, but ultimately, at the end of the day, we would fight about, he wanted the cheerleaders to dress more skimpy. He wanted to bring he and his buddies to Google at the girls at, rehearsals. He was just, I felt he was troubling in many ways. But finally I got called into his office and he said to me, I want you to take all the Black music off your playlist. And I said, what? And he goes, look up in the stand. There aren't any Black faces up there. This is Boston. Oh. And I said, 70% of the team is Black. And everybody loves Prince and Michael Jackson and Aretha Franklin and MC Hammer. It was the 90s.
Right.
Yeah. But he wanted me to get rid of that music. And I didn't. The next day I turned in the same playlist that was, by the way, really diverse. It had, country, pop, dance music, oldies. It had a bunch of 36 different tunes.
Yeah.
And I didn't change it. And I got fired for that. And nobody would represent me at first, no lawyers. And I found a lawyer out in the suburbs who specialized, as it were, if you talk about all the stars aligning, he specialized in employment law. And he said, I'll take your case. So we sued the Crafts for wrongful termination and we won.
Wow.
And we settled in mediation and they wrote me a check. I was able to move back to Los Angeles and start my broadcast career.
Amazing. You got back to LA, which is what you wanted. You got a check, also amazing. But I think that's one of the many stories in the book where you really see your character. You're a minority as well. You were Latina. You were like, no, this is just unacceptable. When a lot of people would have said, I need this job. I'm just going to take this music off. Who's going to know?
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of people operate like that. But I just knew in my gut, this is not right. And I was offended by it. And now I look back at what happened to the Crafts and some of the character issues that we could see. And I was like, wow, I'm glad I did what I did. I'm glad I got out of there.
Me too.
And came home.
I know that had a happy ending for you. Okay. Another interesting interpretation of bravery for me was this horrible story you have in the book of having a miscarriage on live TV during Monday Night Football because you had gotten that detached from reality. You explain in the book that you were just like, I just need to do a good job. Nothing else mattered. And you end up opening up to your father that at that point you're depressed and almost suicidal. And for me, hearing that it was brave for you to open up to someone, I think a lot of women like us who put on this brave face and work really hard, you feel weak if something's wrong or you have to open up and tell someone you're wrong. And you realized in that moment, opening up is actually the brave thing to do.
Right. I had endured a lot of criticism in the previous couple of years in sports. And when I got the gig on Monday Night Football, a lot of, the New York kind of powers that be that determine whether or not you're allowed to cover Monday Night Football, they felt I came from LA. I used to be a cheerleader. There's no way that I should have been given the opportunity to be a Monday Night Football sideline reporter. And so because of that, in addition to having an executive producer that was a screamer that yelled at me and used profanity at me, I started to get very insecure and my performance was shaken. And I remember making a mistake after the first game and thinking, that's it, they're going to fire me. And they ended up firing me after that first season. And I just couldn't regain my sparkle. That was gone. It was beaten out of me, and I really started to have these suicidal ideations. And because I was so caught up with the fact that the only thing I am worth is as a sports reporter, that's my identity. And now that that's gone, who am I? What else do I have? I'll never get a job again. That's what I thought. So I considered killing myself, and I almost did on PCH, driving my car. And instead of that, I pulled over and I called my dad and I told him what had been going on with me. And, all of that, I didn't tell him at the time when I had a miscarriage on Monday Night Football because I didn't want him to worry and to suffer the way I was suffering. But now I look back and I think, boy, I was a shell of myself. To have endured that and have lost all that weight, crying every day, being sick and depressed, and then losing a pregnancy on live television. And instead of at halftime calling 911, I just plastered a smile on my face and marched back out on the field.
Put on a coat so no one would know that you were bleeding.
That's right.
The story's heartbreaking to read. To even think of you as a woman, young woman, having to go through that, live through it, keep working. That's why this book's so inspiring. Like, for anything anyone goes through, the lesson in that to me too was that confidence is not something you permanently have, right? I think I was talking to my mom about this the other day. I'm like, sure, you're confident if you're sitting in a room by yourself, but you take a fish out of water, maybe they're not so confident anymore. You said that confidence is like a battery that needs to be recharged, and I loved that.
Yeah, and it's so important too, because we could be in a place where we're safe and secure, and we know our job and we're great at it.
Yeah.
And then if you grow and leave that job and go to the next place, all of a sudden you're not as confident.
Yeah.
You need to rebuild that again, and it can happen. We all go through periods where we're not sure of ourselves.
Definitely.
Or, we're scared, but over time we have to be that brave warrior that we all are, and know that that the future gets better. You just have to stick with it and have that confidence in yourself.
Definitely. I think that's such an important message, because I know you wrote this about bravery because viewers were always asking you, how are you so brave? And I love the answer was, sometimes I'm actually not, right?
Right.
That's the important part to see, that sometimes I have to rebuild that. Sometimes I have to do certain things to make myself feel brave again.
And that was really important because my stories are so popular with kids. So I'm on YouTube. I'm all over YouTube. The kids watch my investigations, which typically end with me chasing down a bad guy and confronting somebody. And so I think they see me as Wonder Woman, running around, because literally running in heels, chasing
I was just
somebody.
About to say, you're always chasing in heels. That's how I know it's you, even if I'm looking at the stove and cooking. I'm like, wait, it's Lisa. She's running.
So many times I've actually just wear tennis shoes. I'm like, honey, no,
this is me.
No.
Yeah. No, that's your brain.
Always heels. But I knew that I was making a difference when kids would start to write me and say, how I'm being bullied in school. How can I be brave like you? And, my parents are getting divorced. I want to stick up for my mom. How can I be brave like you?
What do you tell them?
Then that's why I wrote the book. I started to dig in, and I started to respond, and I did keynotes at schools, and it was always the same type of thing, bullying, comparing yourself to somebody else on social media. And that made me really think long and hard about what are the messages we want to send to people, to young people. I don't have kids. I believe everybody's my kid. I don't have my own children. I feel like your children are my children.
Yes.
I feel like I'm everybody's Auntie Lisa. But I really thought that they need to know that I wasn't born brave and that I went through childhood trauma. And this is how I worked that out.
And overcame all of it.
Yeah, but not overnight.
Yeah.
I took my pain and I turned it into power, but it took a minute.
You did. To become the boss lady who's chasing people around in high heels. Which brings me to our next topic. We got to talk about this boss lady status and help us all. So let's talk about that next. Okay, you mentioned chasing the bad guys down in heels, and that brings me to what I really want to talk about. You hold on to your femininity in everything that you do, whether it's cover sports, whether it's chase down a bad guy and ask a question. I love that about you so much, because I feel like as women, we are challenged to choose either smart and hardworking, or we wear high heels and we're fashionable. Why can we not be both?
Well, and I've been saying this since I was doing sports here in Los Angeles. I remember one of my very first news directors saying, you've got to cut your hair short, wear a navy blue blazer, and get rid of the makeup.
Wow.
Because you need to be taken seriously in sports. They're not going to think you're credible unless you look less glamorous. And I rejected that from the very beginning. I said, no, I'm going to look like myself. I'm going to present as myself because I have a feeling that viewers are smarter than that and they're going to want me to be authentic.
Right.
So I was on the authenticity train going back to the 90s because, at the time they would have focus groups come in, and they probably still do. And they rate, all the news personalities, and they say, great, she needs to do this and she needs to look like this and wear this. And they would have people do makeovers.
Oh, wow.
And they wanted to cut my hair. And I just remember from the very beginning thinking that my femininity is part of my power.
Yeah.
I'm going to use what God gave me in my toolbox. I'm going to use that to get those hard to get interviews. I'm going to smile and look great on camera. Hopefully, do my hair and makeup and do the things that make me happy. But I also think that it's a visual medium that we're in.
It is.
And who wouldn't want to look nice on camera? And I understand some people I look on TikTok and people don't have their makeup on, I look out of bed, and I'm like, that's great for them.
And maybe that's their brand.
That's them. I get dressed up to go to the grocery store.
Right.
I
I'm
like
with
to look
you.
nice.
Listen, I'm a showgirl as well. I feel like if I'm stepping in front of a camera, we gotta
Honey.
give them the entire show.
Honey.
And
yes.
you do every time, from the
I
fabulous
try.
hair to the shoes to the outfit and every single thing. The hard part there, though, because I've been through this too, is the criticism doesn't stop. And specifically, is it Batman Returns when you have a part in the movie and then you're so excited about it and then you watch the movie and the credits named you volunteer bimbo?
Yes.
And I was like, what?
I just thought about that the other day because my ex-husband said, hey, Batman Returns is on TV. And I thought to myself, that's really funny because it brought back that whole memory of me auditioning for the role that was called Volunteer Blonde.
Yeah.
And then they even were giving me a name on this set, I think, Sandra or something. So I was excited. I thought, oh, I'm going to go from Volunteer Blonde to Sandra. And so when I saw the credits roll at the premiere, it said Volunteer Bimbo. I was so shocked because, first of all, the character's not a bimbo.
Right.
She's a volunteer for a campaign.
Yeah.
And she's actually smart and sunny and sweet.
Yeah.
She's not a bimbo. And then I would never have auditioned for it at that point in my career. I wouldn't have auditioned for a role called bimbo.
Yeah.
And so I was really upset about it, actually. And to this day, it's one of those things that, that we need to look for these red flags in our careers. And at the time when I saw that, it made me a lot more reticent about acting because I realized that the power is really with the producers. They could pull that stuff.
Yeah. No, that's very
it's
true.
upsetting.
What do you say to women who go through that? Because I do find we can't win either way, right? Because if we're not glamorous enough, they're so distracted by your appearance or how you don't have on makeup or your outfit's not good enough that they're focused on that. If you do the opposite, then the criticism is you've dressed up too much. I don't know how to win this battle.
That's why America Ferrera's monologue in Barbie hit such a chord with us because that's exactly what she was saying is that there's no way to win.
There isn't.
So you can't worry about trying to please somebody else because it's not about that. It's really about like, what do you want to do?
True.
What do you want to be? How do you want to be viewed? So yeah, you can't, and sometimes I read the comments and the trolls and I do sometimes engage. And then I think to myself, they're an idiot.
They are.
Knucklehead. Why am I getting into these fights with knuckleheads?
Right.
They don't know my path. They don't know who I am. And they don't know where I want to go.
Yep.
So I kind of go back and forth with this stuff. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the labels are there for other people. It's about us breaking out of the labels.
Okay, I love that. All women, I think, face this kind of criticism. So I think that's great. Be your authentic self.
Nice.
Sexual harassment, which you dealt with in many different, I could go through the book. There's the Steven Seagal scene where he wants you to do a private interview at his house. Absolutely insane. You're groped by fans when you're a sportscaster. Another thing that, of course, with the Me Too movement is more open, but there are still women who deal with this and don't know what to do or how to speak about it. What do you say to women dealing with this?
So one of the great things about Me Too and Time's Up has been the notion that women are now being believed. At the time when these things happened to me, I was so scared to tell people about it because I didn't think they'd believe me and I thought I would lose my job. Now it's a lot more, it's a warmer environment for a woman to come forward and say something horrible happened. I've been groped or I've been sexually propositioned at work or whatever it is. And as an investigative reporter, I do many stories about this. So it's really come full circle. I was once the victim of a lot of it. And now I get to report on young women that are coming forward to talk about it. There's also this other component about being a Jane Doe, right? If you sue somebody or if you've been sexually harassed, a lot of times in the documents, the first legal document, you go by Jane Doe because you're not ready to come forward. And through the process of telling your story and finding justice, you start to use your real name and you come forward on camera and talk to, reporters like me using your real name. And so I've helped a lot of Jane Does come forward through my investigations and be seen and be believed. And that's really where we come full circle in my story.
No,
I started there and I'm helping other women avoid staying there.
That's what's beautiful about your story. As you found your power, you have found a way to pass it to other women. And I just think that's absolutely beautiful. Okay, can we talk about love? There's so many juicy love stories in this book, guys. I'm not going to give them all away because you got to read it. But there's 2 prominent love stories. And in one of them, you're dating a football guy.
Yes.
You can say the names, or you can let people read the books if you want to. But I just was floored for you because you guys are engaged. You kind of get into it. And then he reproposes, which seems like a very romantic moment.
Yes.
But what happened?
So I was with Hugh Millen, who was a quarterback at the time. I was a cheerleader for the Rams. I met him. We weren't supposed to be dating.
Right.
We dated anyway. So I dated him for 7 years, gave up 3 different jobs to follow him around the country for his career, all the while making my career happen wherever he was. And as a 20-something young woman would do after doing that, where is my ring?
Yeah.
I wanted to know. And finally he proposed, and we kept arguing because we were young and immature and you know, doing 20-year-old stuff. Finally, he re-proposes to me after a breakup, except the ring is now a cubic zirconia.
But you don't know this.
I didn't know it. And finally we broke up because I found out he was cheating on me with one of my cheerleaders.
That broke my heart.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
And so I took the only thing I had from that whole relationship of 7 years
was this diamond.
Not even a designer bag, not Prada, nothing. The one thing I had was this ring. So I took it to get an estimate because I knew at some point I was going to have to sell it, and I wanted to move home. And this jeweler is like, honey, I regret to inform you, this is not a diamond; it's a cubic zirconia.
I can't even imagine your reaction in the store because my reaction in the book was like, where is Hugh?
I know. I was furious, you know, and I would have gone homicidal for sure on that. He had already moved at that point.
That's good for him.
He was out of the city. He was safe. He was safe. But yeah, I was furious about that. And also I was like, the man was a professional football player for 7 years.
So who would ever think that he had bought you a cubic zirconia?
So in the book, when we wrote the book, I had a collaborator, Irene Zutel, who reached out to him to let him know we're going to write about this. And I thought for sure he was going to say, oh, that never happened.
Right.
But he admitted it.
Oh, wow.
And he said, we were dumb and we were young. I really regret that. And and his wife today, he claims she has a real diamond. So I was like,
I love that.
Good for her.
She has a real diamond.
Allegedly.
Listen, and I'm not mad at you.
Check it, honey.
Listen.
Check it.
You are hilarious. Check it, because I'm mad at Hugh too. But Hugh, at least you stood in your truth.
Yeah,
that is it. Okay, so after reading the book, I was like, I don't want to pry, but I really hope she found love, because you do end up getting married and then that marriage ends. But I'm like, I hope she found love, because you talked about being a professional woman. You were upfront with men. You didn't want kids. You were like, I'm never going to do your laundry. I'm never going to cook. And what killed me is they all want you to quit your job on third date. I've heard that as well a lot. They're like, oh, yeah, that's so great. You've achieved all that. Now, can you quit, please?
Yeah.
What? And you were like, no.
Right. It was really hard when living here in Los Angeles and going to all the sporting events and being in locker rooms with naked millionaires. That really, is intimidating. And so I can understand their perspective. So I thought I'll just always be single. Then I did get married. And I write all about this in the book.
She does.
We're divorced. We're still friends.
Good.
But I just thought, okay, that's it. I'll just date. But somebody came into my life 2 years ago.
Great.
And they actually read one of the first versions of my first draft on like a month after we started dating. And so we're together now for 2 years.
That makes me really happy because after I read all that you went through, I was like, she deserves somebody to love on her. And
Thank you.
Found them.
And I did find that.
That is awesome. Okay, we talked about love. We got to talk about these crazy stories I've been teasing you guys with. That's coming up. Okay, I've been teasing everybody that you have some insane stories in this book. You have been hit by a car.
Yes.
You would go to the Playboy mansion back in the day, but you would only take the food and leave.
Yes. I stole the food.
That's hilarious. You guys got to read the book for all these. But the one I want you to tell is making Dennis Rodman cry, because that is legendary.
Yeah, that was like really one of the craziest things that ever happened to me. And it happened so quickly after I got my job at CBS too. Here I was, the weekend sports reporter. I worked on Sports Central with Jim Hill, and they sent me to cover the press conference that Dennis Rodman was going to announce he was signing with the Lakers from the Bulls. And so we were all excited about it. It was at Planet Hollywood. I'm there in my pink suit, new sportscaster. I'm ready. And he was late getting there. Finally, he shows up with his fiance, Carmen Electra,
Right.
and his sister and his whole team of agents. And they walked in and they smell like weed and sweat and like vodka from the night before. And they were joking about partying all night, and they didn't care that they were like 45 minutes late. But in describing what they were doing the night before, they were really raunchy, and they were talking about sexual stuff.
Okay.
And this was being carried live on ESPN, and, you know, and here it was carried live in Los Angeles. And so finally, you know, he said, I actually just called this press conference to see if you guys would show up because I don't have an announcement to make. Just wanted to make you guys show up. And I was so furious as a young reporter that he wasted my time that I stood up and I said, you are so selfish. You are the most selfish athlete I've ever heard of. We have lives too. You've disrespected us. You've clowned around with the Lakers. And, you know, and so, and I was furious at him. I yelled at him in a press conference.
Wow.
And the rest of all of the media's there. LA Times, you know, all the stations.
No, they're looking at you like.
They're looking at me like, who's this girl?
Right.
She's screaming. And Dennis Rodman looks back at me. Listen, honey, for you to call me selfish, you don't know what you're talking about. I am the assist leader. I've got all these rings. I'm the best teammate.
Yeah.
And you know, so we're going at it. And he starts crying. In the middle of his rant, he just starts sobbing. And everybody's like, I didn't know what to, then I felt guilty. I'm like, I just made this man cry.
Right.
I don't know what is going on. His whole team, he storms off the stage. And Bill Plaschke from the LA Times sticks up for me. He goes, she's just saying what everybody else was thinking.
Right.
Because you are selfish to do this. And so he storms off. And then everybody looks at me and they say, well, who are you? You know, are you an actress? And I said, yes, I'm an actress, but not today. Today I'm a sportscaster. Tomorrow I'm an actress.
That's my other job.
And so it was so confusing. But it, you know, Sports Illustrated ended up doing a story about it, and it catapulted me to national prominence. And within like 2 months, I got a national sports job.
Talk about brave. Did you ever see him again?
Yes, we were on the D.L. Hughley show years later, and he didn't remember it. And D.L.'s like, dude, I saw it. It happened on live TV. And Dennis was like, I did it?
What?
I'm like, you remember.
Yeah, of course you do.
I need somebody that has that original tape to give it to me.
I was going to say you need that. Okay, you know what? I'm going to work on finding that for you because you need it. It is one of the most epic moments. But you know what? I'm not going to keep you anymore. You guys have to read the book for the rest because, believe it or not, we didn't cover everything that's in this amazing book. What I do want to end with is you end the book with confronting your terrible boss from Monday Night Football who never really owns up to yelling at you, treating you poorly, being basically emotionally abusive the entire time you were working for him. To me, though, that sends such a strong message that, like, your story is your own and that no matter what you go through or what somebody does to you, you don't have to wait for them to acknowledge it or apologize. You know what he did to you.
I really wanted originally for him to apologize. That's why I thought he was reaching out to me, was to apologize for this horrible chapter in my life because it had been reported on in the New York Post before the book came out. And I thought, good, well, this will be closure. Yeah. But he didn't. Oh, no. He didn't apologize. He was just like, I'm surprised you would go to the media with this. And I don't remember it that way.
He gaslit you.
He tried to gaslight me. Yeah. And I said, look, I'm not that girl anymore. I know what happened. You know what happened. And I'm going to write about it in my book.
Good for you.
And I did.
Yes, you did. And we all read it. And you all know the truth now. Because as I read it, I was like, I cannot believe he's going to lie. But you know what? I'm glad that you stood up to him.
You know, and I think maybe he misremembered it, you know, and I was really hoping people evolve. We all evolve.
Sure.
And maybe to this day, maybe he has evolved. So I never throw in the towel on anybody. I'm here if somebody wants to apologize to me.
I love that you literally were like,
anybody in the book that I've talked about
because some of y'all owe apologies, I will say. Yes. Listen, you were brave, and thanks for sharing your bravery with us. It made me more brave. You don't know how many moments in this book I read that I was like, I'm going through this or will go through this or have felt this. It's like, you know what? Lisa reminds me, you always have to refine yourself. You can always redefine yourself. But at the end of the day, just keep being brave.
Keep being brave.